This one is very special to me. Um, I've never met this man, but I feel like I know him because I'm married to his granddaughter. And of course, I've heard all kinds of stories from Wesley, his son, and Woodville Jarvis. Fantastic stories in this particular broadcast that was made in April of 1974. Talks about the Canadian River, how it used to rise and fall. He also talks about the old boom days of Borger when things were a little crazy down in our neighbor, Hutchinson County, with the oil boom. Love this. Absolutely love it. It's the second or third time I've listened to it, and now you all get to listen to it. And hopefully we'll have Wesley on someday live. And we're not live, but here someday soon. I hope I can get Wesley to telling stories too. So enjoy. Thank you.
Here with this morning's guest on Spearman Information is Coy Palmer.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We have a real treat in store this morning. We're going to visit with Woodville Jarvis, who's our guest this morning. The program is brought to you by Hopper's A&W Drive-In. And Woodville was through here the other day, and I don't know why I've known Woodville practically all my life, I guess, haven't known Woodville, at least since the 30s. And I don't know why I hadn't thought of him, but George Young was visiting with Woodville and invited him to be our guest here. And of course, we hope that all of you people who are old-timers will not wait to be invited, because we don't know who all of you are. Now, I did know Woodville Jarvis, and we would love to capture your experiences of the early days in the Panhandle here and the different changes that have come about. Woodville, you've seen 2 or 3 changes in your lifetime here.
Lower than that, maybe, in numbers.
You came here when you were 4 years old, you told me.
That's right.
And where did your family come from?
They came from Denton County to the High Plains. We are in Hutchinson County, but my grandfather was in Hansford. He came first.
And how many Jarvises are there here? There's Brett.
Well, they're 3 of we brothers. And we lost a sister in 1928 who was only 8 years old at the time. But in our families, there are the 3 boys, Raymond, Bill, and myself have families, and we are the immediate family in the still new old neighborhood.
And quite a bit of offspring from those 3 families.
They're on the increase.
The Jarvises will live on and on. I thought in visiting you before airtime that you mentioned when you came to Texas, did your family originally live in another state?
Well, my father's people came from Mississippi when he was a very small baby immediately after the Civil War. They came to what is now Whitewright. He had a farm on that very land, and then moved to Denton County, and from Denton County to Hansford County.
And Woodville told me a while ago something that was startling. You used to farm the section that is now the city of Stinnett.
That's right.
And we're going to talk about that and many, many things that have happened during the 70 years that Woodville Jarvis has lived here, right after this message from Hopper's A&W Drive-In. Woodville Jarvis, and I was asking him the location of the Lieb community. There is a Lieb cemetery, but there was a Lieb schoolhouse and a Lieb post office.
Lieb post office.
And you located it on the draw between Pringle and Morris on the east side of the road there.
That section where the draw crosses the corner is the Lieb schoolhouse section. This old schoolhouse is on the east side, and the cemetery is 10 acres out of the northeast corner of that section.
And you mentioned Mrs. Cotter, who was one of the first, I guess the first.
Mrs. Cotter was the first. She wasn't Miss Cotter then. Her name was Carrie Wells, but she rode horseback 14 miles to teach the first Lieb school.
And where did she live, do you know?
Lived south over there with her sisters, Miss Noah Stevenson.
And you know how many students were there at that time?
No, I really don't. Not, I'd say around 20.
Were you one of those students?
No, I wasn't even in kindergarten. No, that was before our time.
That's before you came
Yes.
here. Now let's talk about Clemens, because that's where the county seat of Hutchinson County was at one time.
Yes, sir.
When you first came. Was Clemens a pretty enterprising little town at that time?
Clemens was a very enterprising town as far as the county was concerned. The Canadian River cuts the county right angling across half in two. And the people across the river could come to this side, and the people on the north side could go that far, so that's where the courthouse was. But it was in the riverbed.
And kind of on a draw that leads
It's not
down
on a
the-
draw, it's in the flat riverbed.
It's
And
there.
we've had the courthouse surrounded by river water, and the record's wet.
Is that right?
It just come that near washing away.
And what year was it that the courthouse was moved?
Oh,
Was it 27?
probably. I'd say around 27.
That was about the time that Borger
It
came
was in the
into-
boom days, and the contention was to get the courthouse back over in our part of the county rather than let it go to Borger, so this emergency move was made.
And there was, if you'd waited 6 months and let the people that lived in Borger become eligible to vote, you'd have never gotten it, would you?
Well, we had 30,000 people in Hutchinson County and 160 qualified jurors and 2 courts a-going. Now, you know who worked at the jury.
They really had to work. Let's talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get back to the courthouse. Because you must have been one of those jurors.
I was on the jury by, I thought, almost profession. We didn't have time to form.
I was going to say, it must have taken you out of the crops a lot.
It took us out everything. Except
And it was difficult to get an excuse from the judge because you didn't have
Well,
anybody left, I guess.
we used them up and reused them.
Now, in those days, Borger was wide open, and there must have been a lot of criminal cases.
Borger was a tent town, and that's about it. But there was criminals. They killed their deputy sheriffs and whatever, district attorneys and judges.
There was a time there that it was said that no honest sheriff would live a week, and that seemed almost true, didn't it?
They almost made that a policy.
You of course remember when Borger was put under martial law.
Oh, yes, I was there when that thing took place on the streets to see the show.
And youngsters, 17 and 18-year-old kids, were in charge of the town, really. They ran it. Of course, there was a captain, I think. And
Well, there was all kinds of situations that wasn't altogether good by any means.
but it did stop the crime wave, did it not?
Well,
Or did it?
it helped contain it. It didn't stop it. It helped considerably.
What causes lawlessness like that? Is it just it grows so fast that there's just no plan for taking care
I
of it?
don't know what caused it. All I know is the effect of it. And we had some very unpleasant experiences in
Now,
the county.
Woodville, when you would go to Borger, did you have fear of your life there?
No, I never had any fear. I didn't even think about it.
But wasn't there a time that they averaged a killing a night there?
Oh, they had all kinds of tall tales, and there were many cases thrown out that were never tried for lack of
Evidence.
witnesses disappeared, and whatever. I don't know as far as the statistics go, but I've seen some things that I didn't enjoy.
I was coming from Panhandle to Borger on one occasion, and there were 120 women walking that highway. You remember that occasion, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know specifically whether I do or not.
They had been chased out of Borger by the law there.
They ordered people out,
And
they didn't always go.
come back in at night. Now, let's talk about the election of the courthouse. Do you remember about how many voted to move that courthouse from Clemens to Stinnett?
Well, the thing wasn't actually according to Hall. Now, the records were moved secretly at night. And they were stored in a building at Stinnett. And they are restricted on when and how they moved county records, but since they were there, they were still under the restrictions. But there was no courthouse, no nothing the courthouse was built with warrants. There was not an election to build the courthouse.
Didn't have a bond issue.
No, they got the bond issue after the courthouse was already built.
Now, what was the hurry on that was to build such a building that it would never be feasible to move it.
To make it so expensive that the county couldn't afford to move it.
And it has worked.
Almost did.
I don't think they were going to move it for a while yet.
But as far as the procedures in moving the courthouse was concerned, those records were brought from Fleming's to Stinnett during one night and stored in the building there. But they were sure that they would away from there. Then they issued county warrants to build the courthouse, and there was no bond issue till later.
It would be easy to issue warrants because wealth was in there.
There's no problem there, but it did fix the courthouse and tried to make it so expensive that it would never be.
I wonder,
away.
Could you estimate what it would cost to build a building of that statue right now?
No, I have no idea. I imagine $2 or $3 million.
And do you know how much it cost at that time?
Oh, roughly, I'd say $600,000. I'm not sure about that, but it was.
It is a fine building.
It's well built, I'm sure, and marble and other elaborate stones that would make it tremendous if you attempted it now.
And well kept, the building.
Pretty well kept, yes.
The building is still a very beautiful building.
It's well preserved.
And apparently the majority of people who work, who are elected offices, live in Borger and drive back and forth.
The majority.
It's about 11 miles or 12.
About 12 miles across there.
And I guess until the speed limits came in, that was just a nice little airing area.
Oh, that was no problem. It's a matter of a few minutes.
Now, there's a county judge down there that is perennial, that it seems ageless and has just done a tremendous job. Let's talk about him a minute.
All right.
Judge Coffey.
Yes.
And he's still there, isn't he?
He's still there, and he's, as far as I'm concerned, very well qualified to remain there for some time yet.
Do you know how old Judge Coffey is?
No, I don't. I don't know. But he's... They're complaining, so that's the main issue in the present race is that Judge Coffey's too old, but that by no means impairs his efficiency.
Does he have an opponent this year?
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, there's 3 or 4, maybe 5.
Is that right? I didn't know that. He's run unopposed for many years.
He's run opposed, but this year he will be opposed by enough. I don't know how many right now, but there are several.
And of course that'll be May the 4th, and there probably, if there are several, there probably will be a runoff there.
I would suspect there might be. It'll be split almost to where there'll have to be a runoff.
Our guest this morning is Woodville Jarvis, and Woodville, I know that we're not going to get through in our allotted length of time. After about 10 more minutes, we'll break away for the news, and then we're going to come back and talk some more. But right now, let's kind of switch subjects and talk about what the country was like when you first came. Now, there was no farming of wheat as such when you came to this. You came here in 1904, right?
That's when we came, yes.
And what was the principal industry at that time?
Cattle.
And where did you drive the cattle to for market?
Oh, they drove to Higgins, Glacier, after we came, and it was a matter of getting to the railroad. And they drove to other points, but Glacier's the only one that we participated in.
And did you cross the Canadian to get to Glacier?
No, it's this side.
That's why
on the way to Kansas City, and Glacier's on the north side of the river, going across the country.
The shipping point for a lot of people here because you didn't have to cross that river.
That's right.
Now, the river isn't as bad, I don't suppose. We don't have to find out because we have bridges across it, but since they have the dam, it probably isn't as bad. But it was one more vicious river at times.
There were no barriers to the runoff, to the snow melt, or whatever. We'd have high water that held up our mail. Well, our mail came from Panhandle, and we didn't get mail for maybe a week or more at the time when the river was up. There was nothing to keep it from being under its natural flow, and the snow melt would always bring a high water mark in the spring and rains wherever. could get that river up. That was a major barrier to the whole, especially the north side.
And even when the water was down, it was dangerous, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. This quicksand was unpredictable, and there's been a lot of difficulty.
A lot of cattle lost there.
Well, cattle, wagons, horsebackers, even. You just kind of took things in your own hands when you tried to cross that river.
Did you ever experience quicksand on a horse?
Yes, sir. No, not in a horse, but in a wagon.
In a wagon?
Yes.
Did you lose your wagon?
No, didn't. We got out, but when this water begins to squirt up in mule tracks on all sides of you, you better begin to move. Don't stop is the main thing.
And, of course, sometimes you go into a chasm there that you just fall about 3 or 4 feet.
Well, the thing is, you can get in trouble awful easy in quicksand. You can go into it, you can bog into it, but you can't pull out due to the shape of the sand. It has a wedge effect.
And it just sets there like concrete.
It holds there, and you're just in trouble if you get in quicksand.
What would you do if you were on a horse? I don't suppose anybody's going to be in quicksand, but I've seen people lay down and roll rather than to try to walk out of it.
You can probably do that. I never got in a situation like that, but your feet or the horse's foot, and especially mules. Mules are just a lot more vulnerable than horses in kind of the shape and size of their feet.
Yeah, their hoofs,
they'd penetrate where the horse might support.
And if once you get a horse in quicksand, if they're there several hours, it's almost you've almost lost them.
You've lost it. I saw one car go down. I turned around and went back.
A lot of times you'd had head rises. Let's talk about head rises, because our modern day people who are listening to this tape might not know what a head rise is. Do you want to tell them about that?
Well, that was just what it says. A wall of water would come down the river
from the rain way west of there.
Some flood condition upstream, and you could hear it, maybe, but if it caught you, you were in deep water before you had it was a roll of water, and
I've seen them 3 feet high.
Well, I've heard that they got as high as 7 feet there, but I never saw one that high, but I have seen them, and the river is from bank to bank immediately. There's no
sun shining, and hadn't rained here in a week.
Maybe it is dry as powder house, but this head rise would come down, and the river was high immediately, and it would last for no telling how long.
And there was a man in the community that I lived in. There was a stream there, and a Model T Ford had crossed, and then a head rise came, and he came along, and he was from Wichita Falls, and he looked at those tracks, and he said, if that Model T made it, I can make it. And he almost lost his family. The water finally went over the top of the car, but of course he had his family out before then, but he lost a Cadillac that he'd only had a month. And you can't ever take them down one piece at a time and get all that sand out of the
it's ruined. If it gets full of that water, there's enough sand and stuff that you can't get out. The car I saw go down leaned against the stream, but it went on down. The water, it just kept washing and sinking.
Sand out from under it.
Tried it, but it did lean against the water and finally went out of sight.
And that's an awesome thing to watch that, isn't it?
Well, in this case, it warned me, but the two fellows that got caught out there in the car had a bigger problem than the car did, really. They had a suitcase, and they're both about half drunk. Between the two people in the suitcase, they almost didn't make it.
Almost lost their life.
They lose the suitcase, helping each other up, and finally made it.
Woodville, when was the first farming of wheat started here? Do you recall?
Well, I would say about 1908.
And you said, before we went on the air, you said there was one fellow here that had a header, and he cut all the wheat in the country.
That's right. One header harvested the whole community, and they worked together. The neighbors cooperated in their own harvest and manned the
And he had the machinery.
He had the machine.
That's what you call custom cutters at that time, then.
That was a custom cutter at that time. There was no money involved, but they got their wheat cut and stacked. We cut with the headers and stacked it.
And then moved the thresher.
Moved the thresher, and the wheat was too short to cut with a binder. So the header was the answer to the High Plains wheat problem.
I've heard stories about tall wheat. In fact, I walked in wheat that was waist high way back in the 30s. What's the tallest wheat? Of course, right now, I guess we've got as tall as there ever was. But did you ever see any 50 bushel of wheat crop?
Oh, yes. Yes. We raised 50 bushel wheat, and then some. But the height of your straw is not the key to the yield exactly, but we've had wheat shoulder high.
Shoulder high?
Yeah.
Now, how about, there was no commercial fertilizing at that time?
No, it was just natural fertility.
And
rain.
And plenty of rain. What's the most rain you've seen in a year? Do you recall any wet years?
Oh, yes. Well, the records speak for themselves. They have weather data that will indicate that we went in excess of 30 inches. And maybe up to 40 one year.
And that's almost unheard of now.
Well, yes, now.
What's the difference? Do you think that we will never have rains like that again? Or?
I think we will. I don't think we've changed the weather to any great extent. Now, there could be some influence on the weather by our farming operations due to irrigation, keeping green areas and cooling and air turbulence and whatnot, but...
When you first started farming, it was with mules and horses?
Oh, yes, sure. We never heard of a tractor.
And what about the plows? What kind of plows do you have?
Well, we used 3-disc plows mostly. We used a turning plow and a rod plow for the sod, but after that we used a disc plow.
Is that where the term sod busters came from?
Well, the sod busters, I don't know whether they're referring to the plow or the men.
I think to the men mostly.
Yeah, it was a rod plow that would lay that sod. It would cut under and turn it over. It wouldn't even break the turf as it turned it over. It would lay out in straight
And then you'd
slabs.
have to come back over to break that so you could plant then. Or would the drill do that?
Well, we didn't have a drill. Our first planter was a one-row walking lister with an improvised planter that rolled behind this middle buster. In fact, it is made out of a pan that rolled on a wheel that dropped seeds out of perforations in this pan.
Seems to me I can remember seeing wheat that was broadcast. Was there?
There was wheat broadcast by hand, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, yes, sure.
And, of course, that was a slow process.
That was slow and very inefficient. Everybody'd worked to some extent.
Some bare spots and some heavy spots.
Well, it wasn't uniform, but you covered with a harrow or some light tillage process. But
and you had to depend on getting a rain pretty soon after.
Well, yes, it had to rain to bring it up. It's dry sowing, it was. But more than likely it'd lay there till it got a snow on it.
And what happened to wheat if it laid there until it got a snow? Would it still come up?
Oh, sure. You'd lay there dry.
Woodville, were people using wheat as a pasture in those days as well as now?
Oh, there wasn't enough to amount to much as pasture. They did pasture some, but not
Not
enough.
commercial.
No. It was just, the acreage wasn't enough to mount to a great deal.
We're going to come back to Woodville Jarvis and talk about the first movie that he ever saw, and I think he saw the first one in the Panhandle.
I don't know if it was.
And it was Texoma, wasn't it?
That's right.
And first of a lot of other things, and also some of the changes that have been made in farming. We're just going to have a big visit with Woodville right after we have the news. Right now we're going to cut away from our guest and join Texas State Network for the news.
Once again with our guest on Spearman Information, Coy Palmer.
Our guest is Woodville Jarvis on Spearman Information, and we appreciate you staying with us. Now, I'm sure you did because we have a lot of things. Woodville, when did you see your first picture show?
Oh, I don't remember the time. I remember the place.
Where was it?
It was at Texoma. They had opened their first theater in Texoma, and we happened to be there that first night and went to the show.
Now, was it quite an occasion to go to Texoma?
Oh, that is a common practice. We went to Texoma regularly.
How long would it take you to get there?
It would take 3 days to make a trip. We'd leave home, camp one night, and get in there the next day and get out, if possible, then get home the third day.
And what did you do on nights at camp? I guess you tried to pick the weather so that you'd...
No, we didn't pick the weather. We took it, good, bad, or otherwise. You can't get 3 days ahead with radio now, much less.
How about freighting?
That was the problem. We had this, after we got to raising wheat, we had to haul it to market. And that was a 3-day trip. We'd make 2 trips a week.
And 2 trips a week. And through the harvest time?
No, we'd put it in the bin. We'd harvest wheat, store it, and at the winter,
When the market
slack
got ready?
months, well, the market was beside the point. Time was the element
When you had time.
when we had time to do it.
Now, you went then during cold weather.
Yes, sir.
How did you stay warm? Or did
We didn't always stay warm.
But let's get back to the picture show. That happened to be their opening night.
It happened to be the opening night of the theater that they had opened in Texoma.
You remember the picture you saw?
The only thing I remember about it was some bicycles pedaling away.
And
I don't know what the show or who the show, but I do remember the bicycles.
to see a moving picture, and that's
See,
what
a
it was
motion
called.
picture, that was.
It was something in those days, kind
It
of
was.
jerky, but.
Well, it was a picture.
And did you have any? You didn't have any sound.
Oh, no. It was black and white.
And was the theater full?
Yes. I presume it sold out. We had to wait to get in, but we did get in. And I think there may have been some turned away.
How long did the picture last?
I don't know.
How old were you at that time, Woodville?
No, I don't know that. I just happened to be there.
Just a young kid.
Oh, yes, I was probably barefooted. But we just happened to be there. Dad and I were in Texoma that night, and they were opening the theater, so we went to see it.
Woodville, in those days, you didn't go to the store as a family and sit down and let them fit your foot with shoes, did you?
No, we generally ordered them from Susan Roebuck out of the catalog.
And tried to estimate what size it'd be.
Well,
For a
you-
growing family, that was kind of difficult, wasn't it?
No, if it's too big, big boys do fit. If they wasn't quite that big, well, it was a hand-me-down process. It worked.
And it worked all right.
Sure.
And clothes the same way.
Well, sure. Of course, a lot of the clothes were made there at home.
What were they made of? Did you buy cloth?
Sure.
Didn't have any spinning wheels in those?
No, we didn't spin.
How about, were there any sheep here in the early days?
Very few.
And they didn't last too long.
Well, they were here when we came, and some remained for quite a while now. They did have homemade wool for quilts and things like that, but we didn't spin anything.
There are a lot of romantic stories and novels and so forth written about the wars, the range wars. Were there any such things during your lifetime?
Not as such. We had some squabbles, maybe, but there were no organized.
Where one big rancher had several guns and...
No, we didn't see any of that.
Wasn't any
the
shooting.
homestead was over when we came, and Dad bought in some homestead land, but he didn't file on it. No, it was passed.
What was land selling for in those days, do you recall?
Just about anything. There was this $1 an acre that went to the state that you had 40 years to pay, and if you got something above that, why, that was net profit.
And how about taxes? Were the taxes...
I don't think there was any problem in the tax department.
And were the fences... did people have much fence at that
There was
time?
some fence, but there was a lot of it that wasn't.
Was there open range laws at that time?
Well, as for the laws, I don't know, but there were unfenced areas that
Didn't belong to anyone.
that belonged to somebody maybe, but they
somewhere else,
and it was open to grazing.
So there was open grazing.
There was open grazing.
How about the roads when you went to Texoma? Did you go to the roads?
Well, it was a wagon road. It was across the country in that direction. There was no section line roads.
Now, next Saturday, the governor for a day, Max Sherman, is going to be in Borger at Frank Phillips College to dedicate a marker there that marks the spot where I believe Santa Fe Trail, they said, was crossed there. Do you recall seeing the old Santa Fe Trail?
No, not in this vicinity now. I know some of the old markers. I don't know where he put that marker. But those trail days were before our time.
I thought maybe you could still see the imprints of the trails.
You could see, I know of some places where you could see the old roads that they had made in this grass across the plains, but as to what trail, I couldn't identify.
Woodville, do you recall the first tractors that were used?
Yes, sir. Of course, the first power we had available to our area was the steam engine. But the gas tractors came along later, and the old Oil Rumley and Avery and the Reeves and some of those old tractors made their way in, and that is before they were in common use. They were a rare thing.
Was a tractor, there were tractors powered by steam, was it?
Oh, yes.
What did you fire them with?
Coal.
Coal. And what kind of an experience would that be? I can't imagine.
Well,
did you have to have two people to run it?
Well, yes, generally with the plowing crew, they had a gang of disc plows they'd pull, and it took one old boy to steer it.
And one to
fire it and haul water and this and that and the other. It was a complicated affair. But we didn't have tractors then. We drove mules.
How long before you had tractors?
1919 was the first tractor we had.
That must have been a Fordson. Case. Had lugs on it.
Oh, yeah. No, it had angle irons.
Angle irons?
Angle grouters, they called them. It was a small tractor, 15 horsepower, but it had angle irons on the wheel.
15 horsepower. What's the big tractor now? How many horses?
Oh, from 100 and up, 150.
And that took you 2 days to drive it from Amarillo to back
to the farm.
And I guess that was a big excitement because the Jarvis family probably was one of the leaders, probably had one of the first tractors.
Well, that was one of the first tractors in the community. We worked with teams, and big teams. We drove up to as many as 16 head in one team, which we didn't drive, we herded.
Now, but they weren't strung out, were they?
No, we'd work in
the breast.
Well, we were strung out, yes. We'd have about 3 deep.
3 deep, and then about 5...
4s and 6s. We put 6 behind, then 4 and 4s, something like that.
And did you have lines that long? How many lines would you use? Just one set of lines?
No, they had a line control deal, but they really had lines on each team, side-by-side team.
Were there any big ranches right here in this area at that time? I mean, a big 50 or 60 section.
Well, there were scattered around the ranches in the area, but as it settled up, it broke up. And we leaned toward the farming emphasis.
There was one big holding that I've often wanted to visit with somebody that could give me a detailed story of this, and I've heard so many stories when I was at Stinnett about the Wittenberg ranch, considerable holdings there, and the financial situation of the Wittenberg family was very, very poor at that time.
Well,
and the oil came in. Can you tell us that story?
They had quite a struggle. Now, there were 2 of the Wittenbergs. One of them had the hotel in Clemens, and the other one was a landman. And he liked the breaks land because he could get more of it for less money. And his first experience of financial success came when the oil struck. Up to that time, they had been in problems that you wouldn't believe, but they stayed.
They hung on.
They stayed, and that was the secret of the whole operation. Anywhere, anytime, the people that came, the big problem was to stay. Now, we had 3 kinds of people. We had 3 kinds of people that come here. One kind went back to the white-skinned folks. The other kind stayed, and the third kind moved on after a few years. We began to settle up to where they could get a frontier to Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, and whatnot.
What we call the pioneers.
They had it to where they didn't like it when it crowded them, so they moved on. But
that's interesting. 3 kinds of people.
Well, that's
the kind that went back,
the kind that didn't stay, the kind that stayed, and the kind that moved on. That's the 3 people that we had.
Were there any churches here?
Oh, yes. We had, Dad was one of the people that it put a boost behind the farm business. That's when the plow-up really occurred, was in that period of time.
Now, let's get to the Dust Bowl days. You lived through those. What caused the Dust Bowl?
2 or 3 things. We had the Depression to bankrupt everybody. We got out of money. We didn't have equipment. We didn't have money. And we didn't have experience. And the Dust Bowl, it didn't happen overnight. That thing developed and grew in on us. And when it got to its worst, we already had the financial problems of the Depression, and one just stepped right into the other. Well, we didn't know what to do, and we didn't know how to do it. We didn't have the power or the equipment, so the Dust Bowl was just a natural result of conditions. Now,
Plus the drought that came.
The drought contributed to it, yes.
But we've had drought since, and we've learned how to control
We
it.
could control it, and if you will stop that thing when it starts, you can prevent it to begin with. That's the first thing. The next thing is when it does start, stop it before it spreads. This thing spread in, and it grew.
It went over a 4 or 5 state area.
It covered a tremendous area, and we were perhaps at some disadvantage from other areas, but we had the problem right here with us. It wasn't something that...
And everyone had the same problem.
It was all the same.
Many people gave up and left during those days.
Well, the abandonment was the big problem. The financial problems of the Depression, plus the disaster of the Dust Bowl days, and abandonment was the biggest problem in the whole operation. Just
About the only thing you could really do is raise a garden where you had a windmill, is that right?
Oh, well, they didn't have anything but windmills. But there's a peculiar thing there. Back in those days, right out in the middle of what you thought was a desert, some old boy, by guess or good luck or by knowing how to do it, raised a crop.
Now, you've had very, very few crop failures since the Dust Bowl days, but there have been a lot of dry years. The farmers still need to learn more about how to keep their moisture, I guess.
That's right. There are problems of, first of all, getting moisture, but the next thing is to keep it, to retain it. But during these years that we have experienced drought and problems, the summer fallow program in raising wheat has been, to me, in my operation, the one thing that I depended on.
Now, we've been through a period of perhaps 15, maybe 20 years, I don't know how long, that the production of wheat was limited because of the government program, and that's all lifted now. Do you think that's going to probably lead to more problems?
I don't know market-wise, but in the operation, I still think it's wise to retire a portion of your acreage and give it a summer tillage program and bring it back in under a favorable condition that I don't intend to make a crop failure on.
And you haven't had very many crop failures.
You just won't fail except by hail or something like that.
You have had a few hail.
I had hail losses, but as far as drought is concerned, I think the summer fallow program on dry land farming, on dry land, I have no complaint to the irrigation people, but I'm still dry, and at this stage of the game, I intend to stay.
And we're looking for rain right now.
We're looking for rain, but this Bushland experiment station furnishes you statistics that claim that we only utilize a third of our rainfall. Evaporation, runoff, and weed growth take 2/3 of our moisture. And for me, that's something to work on.
So how do you control the weeds? By plowing?
Well, mostly you can control them chemically, but that involves other things. But it's not too big a job to do it through tillage. Your problem is, first of all, to get that moisture in the ground. The next problem is to keep it there. That takes the surface operation, which automatically takes care of your weed problem. Now, your big problem, the biggest problem is that when you do get an excessive rainfall to prevent this runoff.
And the farmers can very well utilize the services of the experimental station.
That's right. That is a tremendous help, I think, to this area. It's in our climate, it's in our soil, it's in our area, and they are available for any assistance that you ask for.
And at no cost to you.
No cost. It's yours. I think it's great.
Of course, it's been a cost. We've all paid taxes.
Well, we've supported it, yes, but I think it's valuable. I think it's a resource that we can use considerably more.
Woodville, we're almost out of time on the tape. Is there anything that we've missed? I've jumped from one subject to another all morning, but is there anything that you'd like to say?
Well, we talk about those old times. They weren't so bad. But the people that stayed, I think they were rewarded for their effort. And I talk about the inconveniences. My daddy drove 270-odd hogs across land to Channing in August.
When it's hot.
And didn't lose a hog. They carried 5 wagons. They drove these wagons up. They had one water wagon. They had feeding otherwise on these others. They put them side by side and covered with wagon sheets, wet the ground down in the heat of the day, and took 11 days to make the trip.
And didn't lose a hog.
Didn't lose a hog. They had some shrinkage maybe, but they went to Fort Worth. But it shows what you can do and what you need to do to accomplish an objective. He was in the hog business along with the cow business, and when you look back over some of the things that people did now, they worked at the thing. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a recreational venture. It required work, effort, dedication. They made it go. I think they had something that we've lost a lot of.
And let's try to recapture that.
If we can recapture that kind of a spirit, I think we're all right.
And that's what made our nation great.
That's where it come from.
That's
but
right.
It'll keep it going. So I think that they had a character of fiber that we still need.
And hopefully we'll regain.
Well, we better.
Or we're in trouble.
We're in deep trouble.
Our guest this morning has been Woodville Jarvis. And Woodville, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. We appreciate it very much.
It's been a pleasure.